So today I'm going to talk about the hidden inner critic. And I'm going to start this conversation by reminding everyone watching that there is literally no inner or outer, that the world that you are living in is a projection of what's going on inside of yourself. And there's a lot of nuanced things to understand about that. But today I want to talk about a hidden inner critic. And I call it hidden because not everyone's inner critic is going to sound like a conscious thought telling you you're too lazy or stupid or that you're not beautiful enough, right? There's very obvious voices of the inner critic that many people do hear voices in their head that talk to them along those lines. But I want to talk to you about something that may be more hidden from you and how to know if that's operating within you and what to do about it. So I'll just, again, I give stories from my life because my life is my teaching, and I think that goes for everyone, but it's really proven to be every experience that I have, teaches me something very deep about myself. And that would be true for everyone if we would just pay attention. So recently I went through a few months of an experience where it was revealed to me, this duality within me was revealed to me. And I was embodying I would call it like a battered housewife syndrome kind of energy. Like I was taking a lot of flack from someone. And I chose to do it, right? Nobody forced me to pick up the phone. Nobody forced me to listen to every conversation. I'm glad I did because I really understood what I needed to learn. But I was embodying this energy that really exhausted me. And intuitively, I knew that this was the energy that's been operating within me in my past that would create physical symptoms like autoimmune things, skin issues. And it's a part of me that believes that I deserve to be punished. A part of me that believes that I'm some kind of guilty sinner that deserves to be punished, that I'm some guilty woman that deserves to be punished, that women are always the problem and we deserve to be punished. I'm expressive of my emotions, therefore I deserve to be punished. I say what other people don't say, so I deserve to be punished. And so I was really embodying this victim energy of choosing to receive punishment, knowing that I would, every time I would pick up this person's phone call, that's what I would get. And I chose it every single day until I wore myself out to my last nerve. And in my life, that's how I've learned a lot of things. I don't recommend it. But even in Tantra, they say sometimes, the fastest way to get over an addiction, including a psychological addiction, is to wear it out. It's not the best, well, who am I to say what the best course of action is? In my life, that has led to some physical issues, but because I go in so hard, I really do get out the other side. I learn the lesson and I get out of that energy for good. So what I noticed though, right, I just started pondering, okay, I'm definitely embodying this battered housewife syndrome, this female energy, this unconscious female energy that's been in my family for generations, that's been in the collective consciousness for thousands of years, right? Embodying this idea that I am inferior because I'm a woman, because I'm sensitive, because I'm intuitive, because I'm different than in my immediate family members, and so on and so on. And that when you embody that energy, you pedestalize people. You pedestalize spiritual teachers. You might pedestalize men or women. You might pedestalize people that you perceive have gifts that you want but you don't have, right? A lot of times we mistaken the fact that somebody could have a spiritual gift, like channeling information or like being a prodigal musician, or as being more enlightened or more important or more worthy of love than we are. So therefore we submit to them as our superior, right? That's a symptom of what I'm talking about. But I began to notice, well, because there's no inner or outer, that sadistic part that's showing up in my external world must also be in me, because there's no inner and outer. And before I go into that part, I will say that embodying a victim doesn't make you any less sadistic, right? I use sadist and masochist and these words to convey an idea for the purpose of this conversation, but embodying a victim is very sadistic to self and actually to others, because when you harm yourself, you hurt other people, you make them worry about you, you drain their resources, you affect the world when you are embodying this consciousness, and it is a type of narcissism or sadism. But for the purpose of this conversation, let's call it the part of us that behaves like a victim. Okay? Within self, right, if there's a part of us that is being the victim, there's kind of a counterpart that's the sadist. And for me, this was showing up in my external world, somebody who was really expressing that part. They were embodying that more male part, and I was taking it. And so I asked, how do I do that to myself? How do I sadistically abuse myself? Besides embodying the victim, besides the willingness to torture myself, besides the willingness to submit to cruel words, right? I kept using, it's interesting, if you pay attention to the way that you describe the person on the outside that's giving you problems, right? I would call this person the morality police. This person is morally superior to me. This person believes they're morally superior to me. So I flipped it and I said, how is that going on inside of me? How do I do that to myself? How do I do that to myself? And I realized, like, wow, I have an inner critic. That's really harsh. And it doesn't show up as conscious thoughts of saying, you're ugly, you're stupid, you're lazy. Although sometimes I get a whiff of those kind of thoughts. It's more like when I try to move forward in my life, take a step back. When I have a human reaction to something that isn't perfect, right? Because I'm very much about the process of correction and perfecting, and there's nothing wrong with that. That can coexist simultaneously with knowing that you're perfect as you are, and it must coexist simultaneously with knowing that you're perfect as you are, or else all you're doing is harming yourself. But every time I would have a reaction or a strong emotion, every time I would feel guilty, or every time I had a desire, this other sadistic part of me would say, no, wrong. That's lower human stuff. I've shared before that in the past, like, if I were to have a judgmental thought, this was like 7 years ago, I would reread the Course in Miracles, which, again, this isn't a bad thing. Like, I'm really dedicated to transformation. However, it was done in an energy of self-judgment. It's not done in the middle where I can acknowledge, okay, I want to show up better in this way. I want to communicate better. I want to come from my heart more, but at the same time, not condemn myself for it. Right? That trickster energy never wants you to be in the middle. It either wants you to be high and righteous and better than everyone, or it wants you to be lower than everyone, or it wants you to be so self-responsible to the point that it gets harsh, or not responsible at all to the point that you're being ignorant. It's never in the middle where we take responsibility, yet we also do so from a place of radical self-love. So I just started pondering this, like, how am I the morality police to myself? How do I have a surveillance camera on myself? How am I surveilling myself? How do I have such a harsh eye on myself, as if I'm emulating this idea that God is this punishing God that's always judging me? There's a part of my mind that does that to myself, and it manifests for me as an unforgiveness of my humanity. I'll put it that way. An unforgiveness of my humanity. Oh, I reacted. Oh, I lashed out when I felt my boundaries were crossed. Right? Then the guilt comes in, and that's the trickster energy. It's okay to consciously reflect on something and say, I want to show up better, right? When you reflect about your behavior and what you want to do differently, that's you consciously taking the reins of your experience. But if guilt starts to flood your experience right after you do something, like have a reaction, make a mistake, or have a very normal human reaction that's actually the intelligent thing that should be happening in the situation, if some part of you starts to put you down for it, that's that hidden inner critic. So I would ask, like, are you someone that's very aware of self, but perhaps in a shameful way? A lot of people are talking about this now, shameful self-awareness versus loving self-awareness. I have to say that I've been in a space of shameful self-awareness that's been made conscious to me, and being so aware of it now, I feel this tremendous layers have lifted from me, because I realize, like, okay, I really do mean well. I really do mean well. I really do want to show up in the best way. But I don't have to hate myself every time I'm not perfect. We're never perfect until we become the perfected soul, which I think is a good goal, but just like any goal, right? Whether it's on your way to the body that you want or on the way to the business that you want, why would you break your own bones, right? Why would you shatter yourself every day that you're not there? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, but that trickster energy that masquerades as a moral high ground, as this judging God. It's really the psychological equivalent of the judging God, the belief that God is a judge and my humanity is despicable. Therefore, I have to surveil myself. And surveillance is different from awareness. Awareness is just observing, right? I would call it, I always tell people to feel your heart and feel your root chakra at the same time. You feel love and stability at the same time when you communicate, when you act. When you observe something in yourself, feel stable and loving at the same time and say, okay, I feel something within me that wants to show up differently, but it's okay. I'm doing the best I can. Reinforcing the idea that you're doing the best that you can, always acknowledging that you are enough, right? That phrase, I am enough, has become a kind of spiritual platitude, but I want to really say it's one of the most important beliefs that you can fire and wire in your system. And just look at your life. Is that harsh inner critic manifesting somehow? Like, every time you look in the mirror, is it hard for you to look in the mirror? When you touch your body, you know, a lot of women are squeezing and pinching themselves, and, you know, even people online that are promoting things like lymph drainage, or like, oh, let's get rid of our nasty cellulite. I get it. We've been programmed to think that way. We've been programmed to think that way, and it's time to stop thinking that way. For the sake of the future, for the sake of our children, but really for the sake of ourselves. I was thinking about, I haven't had the experience yet of having a child, but when women become pregnant, they let go of so many rules that they impose upon themselves, right? Restrictions, because they innately know, like, the most important thing in the world is to support the growth of this child. To support the growth of the child. We have to treat ourselves that way. We have to treat ourselves as if we're pregnant with a miracle that's going to be birthed. We have to take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally. We need to acknowledge that there's always a process of becoming, but consciousness, like, nobody could have ever done anything differently than they've done, the way they've done it, including yourself. No matter how much you've read, no matter how much you know, how much spiritual scriptures you study, no matter what you do, you can't do better than you're doing now. And that has to be enough. It has to be enough for you. If it's not enough for you, that's the inner critic. And the inner critic is also, there's a gift in it. It's the impulse to evolve. Dissatisfaction is divine. Being dissatisfied with the way I'm showing up, there's light in that, because it causes an involution. It causes this pressure to mutate myself. But you can do so in a loving and understanding way. And the more forgiving you are of your own humanity on a moment-to-moment basis, the much more likely you are to show up the way you actually want to show up, because we treat other people the way we treat ourselves. And sometimes we do treat other people well, and we treat ourselves especially badly. And you know you're one of those people if you really feel that you come from your heart and you care so much about other people, but for some reason your life manifests a lot of pain, maybe physical illness, the essence of an autoimmune condition or any condition, right? It's about self-hatred. It's about self-judgment. It's about self-punishment. People that are in the arena of shadow work, like myself, they can have the tendency to go too far in to hyper awareness, where it becomes just criticism, judgment, and punishment. And if there's not love in what you're doing, there needs to be an adjustment. When we appreciate ourselves, when we love ourselves, when we treat ourselves like the unborn miracle, like the baby, our soul, our system expands and can receive more light. If you feel like you really mean well in life and you've always come from a loving place, but you get abused, people have screwed you over, people, somehow you've lost a lot in life, it's because you don't love yourself enough. You don't love yourself enough. And I want to say very clearly that if you are coming out of I want to call it battered housewife syndrome energy, which is equally sadistic. I'm not saying poor us, we're the battered housewives. I'm saying this is the strategy our ego has chosen to control reality, to be a victim because we feel powerless. If you are moving out of that energy, you will have to go through a period of almost what feels like narcissism. This is very typical of somebody with a North Node in Aries. You have to go through a temporary, almost this sense of like, I care about myself much more than I ever have, almost more than other people. I don't care about what people think about me. I don't care if somebody judges me for this. I don't care if somebody's not going to like this. I don't care if this person... Now, that doesn't mean you go wreak havoc in your world. That means, whatever you choose to do for yourself, you can do in a loving way. But it's just a fact of energy that when you come out of a repressed state where you are more submissive, more self-loathing, when you crash your own energy in on yourself, when you put yourself down all the time, when you put yourself last, when you always are surveilling yourself for being imperfect, that's like being in mud, right? What gets you out of the mud? You have to heat it up, right? So if you know Ayurveda, you know what I'm talking about. You have to add fire. Now, fire is not necessarily being a narcissist, but it's being direct, knowing what you want, going for what you want. And the notion of going for what you want and actually caring about myself is so foreign, right? Being a victim and being in the battered housewife energy is still selfish in its own way. It's everything we do is self-serving, but this feeling of really moving out of that and saying, choosing what you want and not being so hyper aware of what other people want from you, and even so hyper aware of how other people feel about it, to go for what you want is gonna feel like you're caring about yourself more than others. But what's interesting is that when you move through that, when you cross a certain threshold, all of a sudden it starts evening out again, where because you've changed that energy, because you've actually moved out of that, those years and years and years of repression and using victim mentality as a way to get what you want and control reality, because you're moving through the fire, which people might not like, eventually, when you start to see the benefits of it, when your health comes back, when your power comes back, people will start to say, oh, I see why they did that. You give up people permission to do the same thing. And remember also, everybody's learning different lessons. Some people are learning to open their hearts more. Some people are really learning to care about others more. Some people care about others too much. And that doesn't mean that those people are better than the other people. It just means that the ego has different strategies. Some egos are more narcissistic and service to self oriented. Some people are more service to others oriented, but to the extent that it's a trickster energy, where actually if you keep on draining your energy, getting sick, losing money, and being abused and lied to, well, there's something off there, right? So both are ego strategies. One is not better than the other, but when you move out of narcissism, you really have to bring in empathy of others, learning to listen to others, right? Connecting to your environment, to your community. Whereas when you're getting out of the more unconscious feminine energy, it's like, wait, who am I? What do I want? What do I feel? What do I want to eat right now? Like, where do I want to travel this year? Like, what do I want? Where do I want to live? That sense of self that we have to carve out is actually very foreign to some of our psyches. And don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of anybody calling you names or judging you for it. You have to go through it. You have to go through it. And when you go through it, when you're brave enough to start being selfish, you end up helping more people, actually, because now you're not hurting people by staying in the repressed unconscious female energy. Now you can inspire people. The people that need to learn what you learn can look at you and say, oh, she's a beacon for me. He's a beacon for me. Because you cannot homogenize spirituality. You can't say it's all about the heart and opening the heart. Let me tell you again, some people's hearts are very, very open, but to the point where they're idiot. It's called idiot compassion. I'm so compassionate for everything, but I don't use my discernment and I don't make choices that are healthy for me. Some people are so selfish and all they think about is how they're better than everyone and how everybody's inferior to them, and there's no love, and that's just judgment, right? So you have to know where you are to really know what you need to move through. What would actually be an evolution for you is very specific to you. So I've gone on a tangent a little bit, but this video, it was really about that hidden inner critic, that it can manifest as a way to put you down for being human, for not being perfect. But that is psychologically the representation of the idea, the hidden inner critic that's sitting there surveilling you, judging you for being human. That is your belief that God is a punishing, judging God. And so you have internalized that idea, and that part of you is abusing other parts of you. I know, it's trippy, but just look at the way you're showing up in life. Are you putting up with a lot of things? Are you being a doormat? Are you being a doormat? Again, you might have to move through some narcissistic energy and start putting your foot down, not caring, cutting people out for a little while, right? Sometimes we're so used to frequency matching and not knowing who we are that you need to get rid of information and data to empty out, to just hear yourself again. But people are afraid to do that. That hidden inner critic will say, no, that makes you a narcissist. Don't do that. So do what you got to do to evolve. Only you know where you are. Only you know what would be a step in the right direction for you. But just remember to love yourself every step of the way. What does that mean? That means loving yourself is such a dynamic thing. It means care about how you show up, but care about how you feel about yourself more than anything else while you're doing your best. While you're doing your best. And it's always helpful to think about children. It's like when any child is learning to do anything, we don't criticize them, we don't like throw rocks at them, we don't put them in timeout because they're not like an Olympian or a prodigal musician or but that's what we do to ourselves because of what we believe about what God is and internalizing that belief. God is love. God is love. If you want to be like God, love yourself and think of yourself as a vessel. This is a Kabbalistic idea. It's not a Kabbalistic idea, but it's something that the Kabbalists express very clearly, that we are a vessel receiving the light of the Creator. Every time you criticize self, you crack the vessel. How can you reveal the light of the Creator? How can you manifest the light of God if you're not taking care of yourself? You're cracking the very vessel that is meant to be revealing the light. So while the vessel is cracked because of all of our negative reactive patterns, we have to seal those cracks. We have to heal them. We have to learn how to communicate better. We have to be self-responsible. But we also have to be mindful that every time we harm ourselves and judge ourselves for being human, we do crack that vessel, right? And we lose power. And that's just how it works. So I hope this is helpful, and I hope you have a beautiful day.